Hello and welcome to Scotty Kilmer Car Talk Podcast. I'm live and I'm here to answer your car questions. I've been answering car questions for the last 20 years on YouTube, and I've been fixing cars for the last 50 years, so take advantage of my honest advice. Nobody's sponsoring me. You notice there's no advertisements here because I don't take advertisements. I just tell people the truth so they can make a good decision about their car. Use the live chat to answer your question, ask your questions, and here we go. First question is Joseph. Joseph says, I have a 2012 Acura TL base. During cold startup, I hear a gurgling sound like a water drain. It goes away, happens in a second. It doesn't affect driving. What could it be? Okay, there's only really two things can do that. If your cooling system is a little bit low of coolant, that means the heater core will have some air in the top of it. And as the water surges through as your car starts and the water pump starts pumping, you'll hear a gurgling. So check, maybe you're low on coolant. Check that. Now, if it's not that, it's your air conditioning system. The air conditioning system pumps refrigerant. And if the refrigerant is either low or if your system's just old and that thing is 7 years old, sometimes as the valve opens, the refrigerant gurgles a little, and if it blows cold air, you can just ignore it. A lot of cars do that as they age. It's just something that happens to them. Next question. Blade Brown says, I got a 2009 Chevy Equinox. I've had it for 5.5 years, and ever since I got it, it shudders when I get up to about 45. Any clue what could be causing this? Well, on those, it's often the automatic transmission starting to go out. Now, of course, you want to check the obvious things like see if your front end is aligned correctly and your tires aren't out of balance. Out of balance tires will do that. Lots of things you can do that. But a lot of times on those, it's the transmission. When it shifts there, they're notorious for having weak transmission. And if that's the case, you've had it for a while, just live with it because to rebuild one of those transmission costs an awful lot of money. Limio EJ says, Scotty, I'm in Tanzania and I'm thinking about buying a mini car, either Mini Cooper, Countryman, or Clubman. Are they good cars? Not really. They're made in England, but BMW makes them. My neighbor's from England, and she had an original Mini when she lived there. And she's had a couple of Minis here, and they just seem to fall apart. The wirings are really cheap, and they start to degrade over time. The first one she had, the engine blew up on it. I mean, they're really weak vehicles. They look cute, and people buy them because they look cute, but really, they're not that well-made vehicles. They just aren't. I personally, I wouldn't buy one. If you do buy one, get a used one. You'll get it cheap enough. If it's low mileage, it might last a while. But let's say you buy a brand new one. Try to sell it when it's 6 years old. You'll lose about 70-80% of your investment because they really don't have very good resale value because they aren't that good cars, really. Next question. Gary B says, I got a 2010 Hyundai Elantra. The headlights seem to dim in and out. Do we have an alternator problem? Well, you might. Here's the easy thing. If you go to any place that checks alternators and batteries free like AutoZone, they will load test your battery and they'll load test your alternator, and they do it absolutely free. Start there. Could be the alternator's going weak. Now, if it isn't, generally it means you have a ground wire problem into the headlights. If the ground wire doesn't ground right, they'll get dim and they'll go in and out. That'll often happen. But do check the battery and alternator first. Next question. Ethel though says, Scotty, why does my engine only knock when it's cold and go away once it's warm? Very good question. Here's the answer. You start up an engine cold, the metal's cold. When metal's cold, it shrinks a little bit. So let's say you got rod knock. Rod knock is when you start it up. Well, the rods knock because the bearings are worn that hold it in place. But they're only worn a few thousandths of an inch. Once the engine heats up, the oil gets hot, and the metal expands. As metal heats up, it expands. Then that gap is smaller because it's expanded and the noise goes away. I see that all the time. Now, if it's really minor bearing wear and it only knocks for a few seconds and stops, sometimes guys can drive them years that way. But if it happens all the time, generally means your engine's starting to go out. And you might think about either putting another engine in or getting another car. Next question. Kausik Ambakar says, what do you think about putting bigger tires on a Honda CR-V 2004? What maximum tires can we put on it? Okay, I don't advise changing car tire sizes for one main reason. Engineers spent years and decades designing a particular vehicle for the right size tire, the right size wheel, so it rides right and it corners right. You start putting bigger wheels on it, yeah, it might look cooler, but it's going to ruin the suspension. It's going to ruin the way that it rides. It can even, if you have an automatic transmission, help wear out the automatic transmission further. Because if you got bigger tires that put a bigger strain, you can wear the transmission out. I do not personally advise doing it. But if you really want to do that, go to one of those Honda websites, see what other Honda guys have done, and follow their advice. Just realize, Scotty says, not a smart thing to do. I wouldn't do it at all. Next question. Ahmed says, what do you think about Chrysler trucks? Okay, Chrysler trucks. Now, I'm not a Chrysler fan by any stretch of the imagination, but let's say you get a Dodge diesel. They don't make those engines. They get them from Cummins. Cummins is a pretty good diesel manufacturer. They make pretty good engines. And the transmissions, they don't make them either. Those are Allison transmissions, and they make pretty good transmissions. But the electronics and the body and the suspension, they're weak on Chrysler products. If I was going to get a big American truck, I go Ford for sure. The F-150s have been out for a long time. They're solid. They got aluminum more in them now, so they weigh less and they get better gas mileage. You're going to get a lot better gas mileage in a Ford F-150 than you are in a Dodge. So that's what I think about Chrysler trucks. Next question. Monster Ranch says, morning from Texas. My '06 Ford Taurus AC blows from the top vents only. It blows cold, but not from any other vents. Okay, here's the thing. When I was younger, that just meant a vacuum line came off because those systems run by vacuum, used to run by vacuum pressure. And when you lost vacuum pressure, the default position was defrost. So that if you're in a rainstorm or in the winter, the window won't fog up because you're getting the defrost to work. But you have a more modern vehicle. And unfortunately, the modern ones, they're not vacuum activated. They run by computers. So what you have to do is find a guy like me that has a Ford dealer level scan tool, hook it up, and do testing. It could be that your control unit is bad, you could have a bad actuator, but with these fancy scan tools, mechanics like myself, we can bi-directionally test stuff. If we think an actuator is bad, we can use the computer to send info to that actuator, and it will say whether the actuator got the information or not. Then it'll show you has the actuator moved or not. And if it got the info and it didn't move, the actuator's bad, and you'd replace that. Next question. Hey, Scotty. No N9 says, my 2012 Nissan Altima has trouble getting up over the 610 Bridge Channel Bridge. It has 102,000 miles. Any idea? Okay, here's the thing. When you got a vehicle and that's a steep bridge and it won't make it up the bridge much, you're losing power under load. So the first thing I'd say is change the fuel filter. A clogged fuel filter will do that. Of course, change the spark plugs and air filter if you haven't tuned it up in a while can be that too. If those don't fix it, generally, it's dirty fuel injectors. And I've got a video, how to clean fuel injectors without removal. Watch that video and try that. You could often clean it up and make it run better. Now, if that didn't do it, what you could do was have a mechanic pressure test the fuel pump, because if it is weak and it won't accelerate uphill, the fuel pump itself could be going out. And with modern cars, they don't have any place to screw a fuel pressure gauge on, so you really got to pay a mechanic, because we have the special tools where we have to take the fuel rail apart, put our gauge on the rail, rehook it up, and then road test it and see what the pressure is. But it could be as simple as a clogged fuel filter. Next question. Davis Kaufman says, Scotty, I have an 86 S10 that runs fine, but sometimes the check engine light comes on, but after I turn it off, turn it on, it goes away. Any tips? Okay, if you want to know what it is, when a check engine light is on, have a mechanic scan it with his computer and see what code comes out. It's an 88, so it's really old, and it doesn't have the good data that a 95 or newer car has on it. But the way they work is when you're driving your car, if there's a problem, the check engine light comes on, sets a code. But that's such an old car, it's OBD1. Once you shut it off, then it restarts the system again. And when you start it up, if it's not on, then it comes on later. But then when you turn it off and it goes on, it's a really minor problem that you're not going to have to worry about. If you do want to know what it is, you're going to have to get it scanned while that light is on. Because those old systems, they don't keep much data. If it was a newer car, 95 or newer, it wouldn't matter whether you turned it on or off. It would have the historical data and show you what that code was. But that old thing doesn't work that way. They were much more basic computers on them. Next question. Red Spion says, Scotty, I got an '07 F-150 with the Triton 5.4. It has 190,000 miles. It has a hiccup while I drive at random speeds at low end. It has no codes. What are your thoughts? Okay, with all that mileage on it, a lot of times the fuel injectors, hey, they just get dirty inside. And you might want to do that video I have, how to clean fuel injectors without removal, have it pressure clean and see if that helps. And of course, with the mileage that it has, if you haven't changed the spark plugs, heck, change the spark plugs, change the air filter, change the fuel filter. Since your check engine light isn't coming on, it's a real minor problem. It's nothing major. So you try that, plugs are worn up, it's going to do that. And those things do come with iridium plugs, and they can last sometimes over 200,000, but as they age, they will start to get minor hiccups. It's just the way it gets when it gets that old. Next question. Levi Wagner says, Scotty, what's your opinion on the old Toyota pickups like the ones from the 80s and 90s? I'm looking at one that has 120,000 miles. And I'm wondering if you know anything about the reliability. All those things were really reliable. The only thing you got to worry about is the mid and late 90s ones had a problem with the frames rotting. So if you're looking at one with that mileage, geez, that's low mileage, for one of those things. Crawl under. If you see the frames are rotten on the rails, going back from the front to the back, don't buy it because the frame's rotting away. If it's not, they can last a long time. And if anybody who watches all my videos, I got one for free from an auction company for making a video for them. And it had the rotten frame on the one side. And I welded 1/4-inch plate steel on there and then sent it to my son in Boston, and he's still driving it 3 years later. I was just up there at the grandkid's first birthday party, and my weld is holding up. It's still strong as can be and hasn't broken off. So, you can weld it up, but stay away from buying one with a rotten frame. You don't want to mess with it in the first place because there's plenty of them out there. And they didn't rot in the 80s, so if you went even older, they're not going to have that problem. Next question. Ken Morgan says, Scotty, please set the focus. The autofocus is changing, and you're in and out. I can't do anything about that. It's a Samsung S Fine. You cannot turn the autofocus off, and it's a garbage system. That's the one fault of the S9. Now, these are live car talks, so you can hear me. You don't have to worry about that. And anybody who knows my new car talks are all 3-minute ones. After this is over, they're turned into 3-minute videos at 4:30 Central Standard Time every day of the week with graphics. And over here is my 4K Panasonic recorder that those are made out of. So don't worry about it. You can hear me, but I can't adjust it. I even contacted Samsung and they said, sorry, it's built into the hardware. We can't change it. I said, well, you should change your software then because it's garbage. But who are they going to listen to, Scotty? No, they're a big Samsung, big company. It makes billions of dollars, You'd think they'd listen to people that are using their products, but it's like everybody else these days. They get your money, they don't care. Next question. Lassie 117 says, Scotty, I'm thinking of buying a Ford Mustang as my first car. What do you think about Mustangs? They are fun cars to drive. That said, if you're going to buy a new one, Get a V8. They're more fun to drive and they last longer. If you're going to use one, have a mechanic like me. Check it out. Period. You don't ever want to buy a used Mustang without a good mechanic checking it out. And here's the main reason. The main reason is guys buy Mustangs, a lot of them drive them really hard. And you don't want to buy something somebody wore out. So you want to have a mechanic like me check it out. And if you are buying a used one, hey, you're better off buying from a middle-aged or older guy than a young kid. Never buy a used Mustang from a young kid because generally they beat the heck out of those things. Next question. Lockjaw Remedy says, Scotty, what do you think of Ford Rangers? I have a 2000 Ranger that runs perfectly. They can be great pickup trucks. Hey, my wife's niece had one. She had 200-something thousand miles. It still ran fine. They can be very good pickup trucks if you take care of them. A lot of guys like the four-cylinders because they get a little bit better gas mileage and they last longer because they're simpler. If you want a vehicle to last longer, you want it to be simpler. So if you get a straight four-cylinder engine, yeah, they don't have the horsepower, but they have less moving parts than a V6 engine that those things have. I see the V6 engines don't last as long as the fours in those Rangers. So if you want long life, get a Ranger that's got a four-cylinder engine in it. And if at all possible, if you can drive a standard, of course, the standard transmissions generally last forever. And you won't have the problem of having to rebuild an automatic transmission if you keep it 200,000-300,000 miles and that wears out. Next question. Banana Man says, I got a 2008 Suzuki Swift. Fuel smell in the cabin when the car's filled or left off for a few hours after a long drive. What's the reason? The smell in the interior. Okay, I got a video called, Does Your Car Smell Like Gasoline? Watch that. It shows you everything you could possibly do. But from those descriptions, the first thing I would check is, have the gas cap checked. Or just buy another gas cap, because if it's not sealing, you're going to get that smell. The other thing that those are notorious for is having a bad evap canister vent valve. When you refill your car with gas, it's supposed to make all the fumes go into the evap canister, and then when you start the car, it's supposed to burn it. If you have a bad evap canister vent valve and it's stuck open, when you refill the car, all those fumes are going to get under the hood and you're going to smell it. So you might want to have that checked too when you're trying to figure out where the smell's coming from. Next question. Ivan Komadina says, what do you think? Is it worth it to invest in an old BMW E30 that has a bit of rust on the fenders and repairable? Engine is fine. Not really. Now, I mean, if you live in Europe where parts are cheaper, you might want to play around with the thing. But once you have rust, rust never starts. It started, it rusts from the inside out. The whole car is probably going to rust out. So that, you're just going to live with something like that. That's how the world is. And why buy something like that? Plus, BMWs, as they age, they generally turn into endless money pits, especially modern ones. That's just how those things are. Everything's plastic and electronic, and as they age and it breaks, they're hellacious cars for fixing. I wouldn't buy one of those. But if you can get it dirt cheap, I've had people buy them dirt cheap for $1,000, $1,500, toy around with them. But if you're going to use it for an everyday driver, not a smart move. Next question. Coach Fink says, Scotty, I'm looking to buy a used 2013-14 Hyundai Genesis Coupe 2.0 Turbo. If you have any tips, what should I look out for? Okay, I'm not a Korean car fan, but you get a used one. You can get a used one a lot cheaper if you price around. They don't have very good resale value. The guy who bought that car new and selling it when it's 3-4 years old is a fool because he's going to lose his shirt. But take advantage of that. Now realize it's a 4-cylinder turbocharged car. The engines wear out faster. If you're going to buy one of those cars, you want a mechanic like me to check it with this fancy scan tool. Our tools, you can't hide anything. If it's a 14 or 13, the data in that thing is unbelievable. When I hook up my fancy scan tool to one of those, I get hundreds of pages of data. Now you might think, how are you going to analyze all that? Well, the good scan tools like I have, they analyze that data color coordinated. The good ones are green, the ones that are iffy are yellow, and the bad ones are red. So we can scan through them pretty fast looking for yellow and red data. And if you can get a really good price, they can be okay cars. They're not going to last like a Toyota or a Honda, 300,000-400,000 trouble 3 miles, but they can still be fun. And if you get it cheap enough, go ahead. Just have a mechanic check out before you buy it because it might have been wrecked, flood, stolen. A lot of problems can happen on a used car, especially when they're that new. You wonder, why are they selling it now? Because if they do, they're going to lose their shirt and everybody knows it. Mike Alejo says, Scotty, what do you think of electronic hand parking brakes nowadays for the emergency brakes? I don't like them because it makes them much more complicated and it's stupid as far as I'm concerned. The old ones, you pulled on a cable, the cable pulled them, simple system. Nothing could go wrong other than it can rust. The new ones, they're all electronic. Some of them are computer controlled. I've seen them break and lock on. I mean, it just creates a rat's nest of possible problems when it used to be a simple system. But now they want to control everything with computers. So they're going to them because they know, hey, that stuff's going to break. Look at Mercedes-Benz. For a while, they were actually making in some of their cars electronic brakes, not just the parking brake, but the whole brake system. Guess what they did? They stopped doing it because they had so many problems with the brakes or at the wheels. When it rains, there's water all over the place. And all the electronic stuff started to short out. It's only common sense. Do you want to put electronic parts where all this water sloshing around? I think it's a really stupid idea. I don't like them. Next question. Tinku Ahmed, Arif Aja says, Scotty, I have a 99 Toyota Altaza. The steering wheel is complaining. Any ideas? Okay, what you do is just jack the front of your car up. I have a video for how to find suspension problems on your own car. Watch that. But the gist is you jack it up and then you pull on the wheels. You hold on to each wheel in the front at about 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, see if there's any play. And then at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock and see if there's any play. And if there is play, look for the worn parts. On those, a lot of times it's just the worn tie rod, the outer tie rods wear, or the inner tie rods. You can check that very easily. Could also be worn ball joints, worn shocks or struts. Lots of things can be, but check it yourself first. Now, if you do all that and you don't have any play going here or there, then take it to a front end shop. Most honest front end shops give free quotes, and they'll give you a good quote on what it is. And if you don't want them to do it, you don't owe them anything. But a lot of times they have to be load tested if you can't find it yourself. And only mechanics know how to really load test them correctly. Next question. Bill and Gellis says, what do you think of the new European Mustangs that cost 60 kroner? 60,000 euros. Are they worth it? Okay. Well, they're pushing it because they never really imported them into Europe, and now they do. Depends on what you want. I know a lot of the ones there are using that four-cylinder EcoBoost engine that puts out 325 horsepower, whatever, and they are fun to drive. If you do want to get one, my advice, get the standard transmission. They're much more fun. I had one for a week with the automatic, and it was a fun car, but it would have been a whole bunch more fun if it would have been a standard transmission. So if you want to get one of those, definitely get the standard transmission. They're a lot more fun to drive. And since they never really sold them in Europe, now they are, you can have more of a unique car to drive around in. It's going to turn heads because aren't there many of them there? Next question. President Donald J. Trump says, Scotty, I'm looking at a 2009 Ford Explorer with 33,000 miles. What do you think about buying a 9-year-old car with low mileage? I've already test driven it. Nothing. If they can prove that that's the real mileage, now realize it's actually a 10-year-old car because the 2019s are out now, so it's a 10-year-old car. Don't pay all that much because it's an older car, but it can be a very good car if they can prove that's the real mileage. You want receipts. You want to look at the record on the internet of if they have state inspections in your thing every year. They do the inspections and it has the mileage on it. And if that doesn't jive, don't buy it because they're lying to you. But it could be a great car. Just don't pay too much because it's a 10-year-old car. And you see what you can get it for. It can be a great car with that kind of mileage on it. Generally, those things didn't have transmission problems until they get 140, 150,000 miles on them. Next question. Hendrik Jan says, Dear Scotty, what is better for my car? Braking on the engine or braking with the brakes? Of course, braking with the brakes is better on your car. Brakes are cheap. They don't cost that much. You can do them yourself. Brake jobs are simple. You watch any of my videos, how to change brake pads, it's not rocket science. But If you are downshifting, you're wearing the transmission, you're wearing the engine, everything wears out faster. And since brakes are so cheap, hey, use your brakes. Now, of course, in emergency situation, and if it's ice and snow or raining really hard, sure, you can do braking with the brakes and with the engine because it's an emergency and you want to stop fast. But for normal driving, hey, brakes are cheap. Use the brakes to slow down. Don't bother with wearing your engine and transmission out to slow down. That's just, makes common sense. Next question, Daniel Geraldo. Is it okay to switch from halogen bulb to LED bulbs? Yes, you can. You'd want to check to get your quality LED bulb because, there's a lot of junk out there, but the newer ones are quality made, work perfectly fine. The only thing is, some cars are set up by computers and they won't work right when you go from halogen to LEDs, especially if you have daylight running lamps. Because, see, a lot of daylight running lamps in cars, when you're driving around in the daytime, the Canadians started all that. Oh, it's safer, let's put daylight running lamps on. Those lights on most of the cars, they're only running at like 5 volts. They're not running at the full 12 volts. And if you put an LED bulb in there, your daylight running lights won't work anymore. I've tried that on some cars and it wouldn't work. Now, if you don't have daylight running lights, that probably work perfectly fine. But if you do, the LEDs won't work then because they're made to work at 12 volts. And if they get 6 volts, they won't light up. So you might want to check that first. Next question. Honda Power says, hey, Scotty, my '07 Accord has an overheating problem. Do you think it's the thermostat? Well, pray it's the thermostat. That's the cheapest thing in a car. You go to AutoZone, get a thermostat for like $10 for that thing, and it has 2 bolts holding it on. Take it off, put it in, put it back in with a new gasket. Simple to do. Now, if it isn't that, there's a whole plethora of things it can be. I have the perfect video for that that's called How to Fix an Overheating Car Engine. Watch that video, How to Fix an Overheating Car Engine, and it shows you every possibility, and you can test them all one at a time. But pray, it's just your thermostat. It's the cheapest thing to do. Also, heck, change the radiator cap. They cost $10, $12, and that just comes on and off. When the engine's cool, just put a new radiator cap on. That's a really cheap thing. And over time, like anything else, they wear out. Next question. Cedric Mason says, Scotty, I got an '07 Honda Civic. The AC blows warm intermittently. Change the AC relay clicking, drive belt, blower motor, and heat sink. Still at times, is the AC clutch control pan or something else? Well, there's so many things that can do that, but that is a 12-year-old Honda Civic. And from my experience with Honda Civics, there's only 2 reasons they generally do it at that age. One is, it's just low on refrigerant. So have a mechanic put on his pressure gauges and see, hey, is it low on refrigerant? And if it is, get it filled up again. The other one is the compressor just going bad. And from my experience, I have changed an awful lot of air conditioning compressors on older Civics. And here's some great advice. Don't even think about buying a remanufactured compressor for that. Buy only a brand new one. You can go aftermarket. I get Chinese made, good quality aftermarket ones, and they work perfectly fine. So that is probably what's wrong from my experience. But have the check for refrigerant first because it could just be low. Next question. William Bayardo says, hey, Scotty, why are headlights so expensive? A pair of new ones cost me over $1,500. Well, you're talking about buying a whole headlight assembly. And that's because they're all fancy computerized with all the other parts in them. And it's ridiculous that the pair costs $1,500 because they're made out of plastic. Plastic is cheap. So if you're going to do that, look aftermarket. Perfect example. My wife's Lexus. I wanted fancier new ones. Well, they were over $1,500 a pair, but I went online and I bought them for $135 a piece. Aftermarket. And yes, I got them from the wrong Chinese company, and I will never buy them from that one again because the idiots had clear coated them. Always ask when you're buying them, have they been clear coated? And if they say yes, don't buy them because the real ones aren't clear coated. They're good plastic, and you just polish them, and there are very good cleaners and preservatives that you can put on them. Buy the silicone based ones so that plastic doesn't crack and fade over time. If you do it, that lasts. Do not clear coat them, because if they are, it's paint. The paint will crack. That's just what happens on plastic. It's the dumbest thing on earth. I've seen idiots say, "Oh, clear coat them, clean them and clear coat them." Yeah, then that clear coat cracks after a year or two, and they look even worse. Next question. Forever a noob, says Scotty. My '03 Tahoe has a brake problem. When I put pressure on the brake to stop the pedal pushbacks, I don't know why it does that. Okay, most of the time, that's a problem in your ABS system. When you hit it and it pushes back, that's the ABS system acting up. Find a mechanic like me that is a dealer level scanner, have them hook it up, and do a test and a road test. He just has to drive it around the block, pass it, and it starts popping up. His machine will record the data, then he can play it back, and he can see if there are any ABS codes that you'll never get with a cheap scanner, but a good scanner will show that. Well, that's it for this week. Now, remember, every day of the week I put up new videos. You can watch these 3 minutes at a time with added graphics every day of the week at 5:30 Central Standard Time. So join the Scotty Kilmer channel on YouTube and click that bell so you always get reminded when I put up a new video. And other than that, I'll catch you here Thursday on YouTube Live at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time doing another live car talk.